With us getting the first marquee character of the year, it gives us a little bit of indication about what's coming in the future for Galaxy of Heroes. We covered a video on this at the start of the year about what we would like to see. I name-dropped a couple of things like Queen Amidala and Chancellor Palpatine for potential future GLs, and I still think that those could happen. But on today's video, what I really want to discuss is about the possibility of a future raid. And that is what I think is going to happen this year. The Battle for Naboo. Just so we don't jump into this and immediately think that I'm completely talking out of my rear end, there has been a little bit of signaling towards this sort of thing. We know one thing for certain. We're supposed to be getting a new raid every 9 months or so. The current speeder bike raid has been out since about November time, which means we're probably going to see something new in about May alongside a brand new GL. That GL, like I said, could potentially be someone like Queen Amidala, or probably more likely someone like Chancellor Palpatine. I think it's going to tie in nicely with the 25th anniversary of the Phantom Menace. So let's just take a quick look then at why I think Battle for Naboo is going to be a thing and how I would like to see it happen and what characters do I think is going to be involved. So taking a look at STAP, if you haven't seen my kit reveal guide of STAP, it's up here in the right corner. Please do check that out. Thank you kindly. Make sure you like and subscribe and all that business. Thank you very much. Okay, so obviously, STAP is a Phantom Menace character, but also the background over here, I believe Arnold was pointing it out, it looks a little bit like something out of Heroes of Middle-earth. I also think it looks a little bit like that default Windows XP background that everybody used to get on their PCs. But it is in fact Naboo. It is the fields in Naboo where the Gungan army faces off against the Trade Federation army of the Separatist droids. That should be a little bit telling. If you also check out the little battle droids at the back here, they also look like they've come straight out of Phantom Menace. So very interesting thing there. That is the first little tidbit. The second tidbit, of course, is the fact that this is going to herald in additional marquees. I do think that the B1 battle droid, which we do see on the Battle of Naboo, is going to be a pivotal character and is going to be required for the next GL and for the new upcoming raid. How would I like to see this go about? I actually want to see this transition to a bit closer to the old style of doing raids in which we had phases, but not necessarily in the exact same way that we've had them in the past. Now, if you take a look at CG's other game, Heroes for Middle-earth, which is under no small amount of scrutiny at the minute due to the radio silence from the devs, they do raids a little bit differently. It's kind of closer to a matchup between TB and raids, where each day is a phase and there are different things to do on each day. I would like to see that happen to Galaxy of Heroes with the next raid. I would like it to be a 3-day raid, essentially. So it's still on the 6-day cycle or a 1-week cycle, 3 days of which you have different phases of the raid, an attacking phase for each, you gain points in each, you get personal reward tracks in each, and then at the end you get a guild total reward as well. The first phase I think makes sense to be the Battle for Naboo, which is just out in the fields, Gungans versus Separatist droids. And yes, I do think we will get Gungans this year, particularly because of this raid, but also because it just fits thematically speaking. Who we get for that, we'll get into in a little bit. The second part of the raid, if you follow in the film of the Phantom Menace, is the assault on the capital city of Theed. In this, we could see some use of Galactic Republic characters, such as Padme, such as Qui-Gon Jinn, such as maybe a new marquee for young Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Padawan the Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi, I guess it would be. We might see additional characters like Captain Panaka come in to bolster Galactic Republic teams under Padme's leadership, which has sadly fallen off. And then hopefully right at the end, finally, we would have a very cool raid final boss fight against Darth Maul, the apprentice of Darth Sidious. I think this would be a great way to do a final battle, and this is why it would have to be multi-phased, because I think that this last fight should definitely be a 2-on-1 scenario. We could be emulating the same way that Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan fought Darth Maul, where you have to proceed through phases where you're locked into using one character at a time, and there would be various buffs and debuffs that you could apply, and then potentially some sort of sacrifice mechanic that would boost the stats of one of your characters. You get to choose who goes through the gate at which time to face off against Maul, and then it would act like a normal raid would, with points at the end of the system. I would love to see that sort of thing coming. It really highlights, I should say, the big problem that I have with the speeder bike raid, and that is that I don't want to speak for everybody, but nobody wants to do a raid where all we're doing is flying through the screen, attacking unnamed enemies with no payoff at the end. Do you know what I mean? There's no climax that builds in that. There's nothing grand. There's nothing grandiose about that raid. Whereas if you look at past raids where we're fighting off against a Rancor, we're fighting off against a Krayt Dragon, we're fighting off against Sith Triumvirate on their home planet, that has got, the stakes there are so much higher. It has a bigger feeling of triumph when you actually beat the raid. And I want us to return to that. And that battle against Maul, Duel of the Fates era, that there is the climax of that film. And it's still well regarded today as one of the best lightsaber duels that we've ever had in Star Wars. I want to replicate that feeling. I want us to go back there. And I'm really hoping that this is what CG is building to. So let's take a moment and think about which characters are going to be used for this particular raid, or could theoretically be used. I mean, I think the basis has got to be, we're going to be getting a number of new marquees. I would say at least 4, probably 1 a month. At least, I'd say maybe 1 every 3 weeks over the next 4 months. That's going to build up to this, and each of these characters are, if not going to be used for a brand new GL, will certainly be used for a brand new legendary event at some point, and most likely be used in the new raid. I'm not saying that these marquees will be exclusive, but they will be used. So obviously we're going to have the Stap. Who could we else potentially have? Well, we've already touched on perhaps a Padawan or Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi that we see in The Phantom Menace. Perhaps we'll get a young Annie. Perhaps we'll get Captain Panaka. Perhaps we will get additional Separatist droids, although I'm not sure how that might fit into it. It's also potentially going to feed into whatever new capital ship that we happen to get this year. We're always going to get one new competitive galactic, or not necessarily Galactic Republic, competitive capital ship. I can speak. Competitive capital ship to the game each year. That's most likely going to happen because it drives good sales for CG, and we need something to keep fleet meta interesting. Now, the last one that we had was the Leviathan. I don't think we're going to see an Old Republic capital ship because it would force CG to release at least 4 normal ships to actually fit into that fleet. I think that's going to be quite difficult for them to do. So maybe we'll get a new Galactic Republic capital ship, or maybe we will get a Separatist capital ship. Those can both of those are quite likely. Normally CG likes to shift from light side to dark side to light side to dark side to light side, back and forth, but it doesn't always have to be the case. For example, I think we went Lord Vader into Jabba instead of like Lord Vader into Leia into Jabba. That sort of thing. So if we actually take a look at what happens in the speeder bike raid, what factions actually have bonuses for that, which factions can be used, you can see we've got 3. We've got Rebels, Imperials, and Ewoks. I think that the next raid will most likely take the same vein. So we'll have Galactic Republic, we'll have Separatists, and then one other. And that last one, to me, just kind of points immediately to Gungans, because if we're getting the Battle for Naboo, you can't do the Battle for Naboo without Gungans, right? It just makes sense. They're going to be a completely unestablished faction. Nobody is going to have them geared up, so it's going to have to be something like that. Now, what CG might do in the meantime is have Gungans as a temporary Galactic Republic faction tag. I think it's unlikely, but I think we will quite easily get potentially 4 marquees for Gungan characters this year that culminate in a legendary event for Boss Nass. We have Gungans like Peppy Bo, that was from the Clone Wars. We've got Tarple, we've got Jar Jar Binks, we've got Boss Nass. There's quite a lot of named Gungans that we can actually put into the game if CG so chooses. Now, I don't know whether or not they're going to do it. Obviously, this is still all speculation at this point, but I'm just trying to show that it could actually happen. I think the real thing that will point towards this is whatever next marquee we get. I would actually be surprised if we get too many more Separatist droids, because I feel like Stap was potentially just a one-off introduction. But that still forms in part of that faction. We could also have the likes of Newt Gunray come to the field. I do think that Newt Gunray is an absolute cert for this new raid. He has not been used or required for any of the previous raids. It makes complete sense that he features in this one. Now, in the previous Krayt Dragon raid, we had about 8 to 11 of each faction that did represent there, so I do think this one will be a little bit different if we are getting Gungans as a faction, because I can't see them releasing 8+ Gungans in 1 year. Perhaps over 2 years it might happen, but 1 year is probably a little bit unlikely. Realistically speaking, if you take a look at the Galactic Republic, there are plenty of Galactic Republic characters to choose from that could fit into this raid. Usually there's 1 or 2 characters that a lot of people have geared up. If you look at the Speeder Bike raid, we had characters like Jedi Knight Luke, you had characters like Chewbacca and C-3PO and this sort of business, and then all the characters required for Galactic Legend Leia Organa's legendary event, they were all requirements as well. And I think we'll see some similarities there, but we'll also see a sprinkling of characters that probably perform very well in the raid that are not necessarily good elsewhere. I'm probably thinking of characters like Eth Koth and Ki-Adi-Mundi and Kit Fisto, characters that are less geared, less likely to be chosen than normal, but they will be these sprinklings that perhaps have very good viability in the raid, just because CG wants us to get us to gear certain characters. Of course, I do expect Qui-Gon Jinn to be a requirement for the Galactic Republic. He plays a pivotal role and features in the battle against Maul. I think that we will most likely get a Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he will be a requirement. And I think that these characters could also potentially be used to unlock whatever Galactic Legend we get from this era. I really do hope it's going to be Queen Amidala, because I think she would look really, really cool. But I don't want to ramble too much on the video. Just to sort of give you a high-level idea of what I think this could turn out to be, is the Battle of Naboo, split across 3 phases. The first one being the battle out in the field, Separatist versus Gungans. Then there is the assault on Theed, where you have characters like Padme facing across the Separatist droid army and the Trade Federation support. And then a final battle, which would be a 2-on-1 duel versus Darth Maul, where there would be interactions with the gates, buffs, and potentially sacrifice mechanics for one of your characters. I would really like to see this happen, and I would like to see CG pushing out some of the really cool characters from this era. I wouldn't be too surprised if we saw someone like Rune Hako also join, who is the other Neimoidian alongside Newt Gunray as part of the Trade Federation representatives. He's a little bit of a cowardly one. I still think that would be a cool character to actually introduce. That would be a nice addition to the Separatists. Perhaps this guy could be a little bit more support for someone like Admiral Trench, who desperately needs to come off the bench. But anyway, those are sort of my high-level ideas. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think we're going to see a battle for Naboo as the new raid? When do you think it's going to happen? And what are your thoughts? Love to hear it. Make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss a video. Peace out, and may the Force be with you.